Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll be going through some practice questions and answers for the Professional Scrum Master I exam. For this exam, the pass mark is an 85%, and we'll be starting right off with question 1. Scrum has a role called Project Manager. True or false? Scrum does not have a role called Project Manager. Instead, Scrum defines 3 roles, which are Product Owner, Scrum Master, and Developers. The Product Owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product and also managing the product backlog, ensuring that it is transparent, prioritized, and understood. The role of the Scrum Master is to serve as a coach and facilitator for the Scrum team and the organization, and also helping the team to adhere to Scrum practices and removing impediments. The role of the developer or the development team is a cross-functional group responsible for delivering a done increment by the end of the sprint, and also for self-organizing and collectively being accountable for their work. Scrum deliberately excludes the project manager role to empower teams to self-manage and take ownership of their work, rather than relying on a centralized authority to direct their activities. So, their responsibilities are traditionally associated with project management, which are distributed across the product owner, Scrum Master, and the developers in the Scrum framework. Question 2. When is a sprint over? A. When the product owner says it is done. B. When all product backlog items meet their definition of done. C. When all the tasks are completed. D. When the time box expires. In option A, this is incorrect because the product owner does not have the authority to end a sprint early. In option B, while completing all product backlog items according to their definition of done is ideal, this is not a requirement for a sprint to end. Incomplete work can be inspected and adapted in the next sprint. Looking at option C, completing all tasks is not a prerequisite for ending a sprint. The focus instead should be on delivering value and learning, even if some of the tasks remain incomplete. A sprint is a time-boxed event in Scrum, and it lasts about 1 to 4 weeks. It only ends when the designated time box has expired, regardless of whether all the work planned for the sprint is complete or not. So Scrum relies on the time-boxed nature of sprints to maintain predictability and enable regular inspection and adaptation. That is why we are going with option D. The sprint is only over when the time box has expired. So depending on if the time lasts from 1 to 4 weeks, once that time box expires, the sprint is over, regardless of if the task is complete or not. Scrum promotes continuous improvement, and if the work is not completed by the end of the sprint, the team can address it during the sprint review and adapt their outcome in future sprints. Question 3. When many Scrum teams are working on the same product, should all of their increments be integrated in every sprint? A. No. Each Scrum team stands alone. B. Yes. Otherwise, the product owners may not be able to accurately inspect what is done. C. Yes, but only for Scrum teams whose work has dependencies. D. No. That is far too hard and must be done in a hardening sprint. Taking a look at these options, option A is incorrect because Scrum teams working on the same product are not independent of each other. Their outputs must align to contribute to a single cohesive product. In option B, in Scrum, when multiple teams are working on the same project or product, it is critical that all their increments are integrated at least in every sprint. This will ensure that the product owner and stakeholders can inspect and adapt based on a single integrated product increment. So basically, the goal of Scrum is to deliver a done increment of potentially shippable product functionality by the end of every sprint. And also, without integration, it becomes impossible to assess the overall progress and quality of the product. Looking at option C, while dependencies make integration more urgent, all teams' work must still integrate to ensure the product increments reflects the collective effort. And in option D, hardening sprints goes against Scrum principles, which emphasizes delivering a potentially shippable increment in every sprint. So, integration is part of the definition of done and cannot be deferred. Looking at all the options we have, our best answer is option B. Integrated increments support effective sprint reviews and can help stakeholders make informed decisions. Question 4. When can a development team cancel a sprint? A. When the product owner is absent too often. B. When functional expectations are not well understood. C. It can't. Only product owners can cancel sprints. D. When the selected product backlog items for the sprint becomes unachievable. When the product owner is absent too often, this is problematic, and however, it is not a valid reason to cancel a sprint. The Scrum Master needs to address this issue in order to ensure smooth collaboration. In option B, lack of clarity on expectations doesn't warrant cancelling the sprint. Instead, the team should collaborate with the product owner to clarify and adjust within the sprint. According to the Scrum Guide, only the product owner has the authority to cancel a sprint. This happens if the sprint goal becomes obsolete, such as when the organization shifts priorities or when market conditions changes drastically. While the development team can provide input and suggest cancelling a sprint, perhaps due to technical dependencies or unachievable goals, the ultimate decision rests with the product owner. If the goals seems unachievable in option D, the team should inspect and adapt during the sprint rather than cancelling it. The sprint can still provide valuable learning. So, out of the options we have, we should know that the development team cannot cancel a sprint. Only the product owner can cancel the sprint. The ultimate decision rests with the product owner. Question 5. How much time is required after a sprint to prepare for the next sprint? A. The break between sprints is time boxed to 1 week for 30-day sprints and usually less for shorter sprints. B. Enough time for the requirements for the next sprint to be determined and documented. C. Enough time for the development team to finish the testing from the last sprint. D. None. A new sprint starts immediately following the end of the previous sprint. In Scrum, sprints are continuous with no gaps in between. So once a sprint ends, the next sprint starts immediately. This ensures a constant rhythm for the team and promotes steady progress. Looking at option A, Scrum does not allow for any breaks between sprints regardless of their length. So whether they are 1 week or 30 days, Scrum does not allow any break between sprints. Immediately one sprint is ending, the next sprint is starting. In option B, requirement refinement happens continuously, typically during backlog refinements, which is part of ongoing team activities, but it is not a separate phase between sprints. In option C, all work, including testing, must be completed within the sprint and meet the definition of done. Incomplete work is carried back to the product backlog for future considerations. So the key points to note is that there is no break between sprints. Planning for the next sprint occurs during the sprint planning meeting, and this takes place at the start of the new sprint. Testing and other tasks from the previous sprint must meet the definition of done before that sprint ends. So if something is not completed, it can be reviewed and reprioritized for the product backlog. So Our answer is option D. There is no time required after a sprint to prepare for the next sprint. Immediately one sprint ends, the next one is starting off. Question 6. Who can cancel a sprint? A. The Scrum Master. B. The Scrum team. C. The product owner. D. The stakeholders. The Scrum Master facilitates the process and ensures adherence to Scrum principles. However, the Scrum Master does not have the authority to cancel a sprint. Looking at option B, while the team can discuss and propose changes, they cannot cancel a sprint on their own. According to the Scrum Guide, only the product owner has the authority to cancel a sprint, and this decision is made if the sprint goal becomes irrelevant or obsolete, or when priorities change significantly, or there are new market conditions that emerges. In option D, stakeholders can influence priorities through the product owner. However, they do not have the authority to cancel a sprint directly. So our answer is option C. The ultimate decision to cancel a sprint rests with the product owner. Question 7. Which of the following is required by Scrum? A. Sprint retrospective. B. Members must be stand up at the daily Scrum. C. Sprint burn-down charts. D. Release planning. The sprint retrospective is one of the formal events required by Scrum, and it is held at the end of every sprint to inspect how the last sprint went in terms of people, processes, and tools, and also to create actionable plans for improvement in the next sprint. In option B, Scrum requires a daily Scrum, but there is no requirement that members must physically stand. The focus is on collaboration and effective communication and not on posture. In option C, while a burn-down chart is a helpful tool for tracking progress, Scrum does not mandate its use. Teams can choose the tracking tool or methods that best works for them. And in option D, Scrum emphasizes adaptability and iterative delivery over long-term planning. So, while release planning can be valuable, it is not explicitly required by Scrum. So, our answer here is option A. The sprint retrospective is required by Scrum. Question 8. What is the purpose of a sprint review? A. To take time to judge the validity of the project. B. To inspect the product increments with the stakeholders and collect feedback on next steps. C. To review the Scrum team's activities and processes during the sprint. D. To build team sprints. In option A, the sprint review is not about judging the product's overall validity. Rather, it is about assessing the increment and gathering feedback. The purpose of a sprint review is to inspect the product increments created during the sprint, collaborate with stakeholders to gather feedback on the work completed, and also to discuss progress towards the product goal and potential adjustments to the product backlog. This event ensures transparency and alignment between the Scrum team and stakeholders, and it also helps to refine priorities for the next sprint. In option C, this describes the sprint retrospective, but not the sprint review. And in option D, while collaboration during the sprint review might foster team spirit, it is not the primary purpose. Out of the options we've been given, the primary purpose of a sprint review is to inspect the product increments with the stakeholders and collect feedback on next steps. Question 9. Who determines when it is appropriate to update the sprint backlog during the sprint? A. The project manager. B. The development team. C. The Scrum team. D. The product owner. Scrum does not include a project manager role. Responsibilities traditionally associated with project management are distributed among the product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. In option B, the sprint backlog is owned and managed by the development team. During the sprint, the development team is responsible for updating it as they work towards achieving the sprint goal. They add, modify, or remove tasks as necessary in order to reflect the current progress and adapt to any changes in their understanding of the work. The Scrum team, which includes the product owner, Scrum Master, and development team, collaborates on various aspects of the Scrum process, managing and updating the sprint backlog. In option C, while the Scrum team collaborates on various aspects of the Scrum process, managing and updating the sprint backlog is specifically the responsibility of the development team. And in option D, the product owner is responsible for the product's backlog, but not for the sprint backlog. So, looking at all the options, the sprint backlog is owned and managed by the development team, and the development team is responsible for updating it as they work towards achieving the sprint goal. Question 10. The purpose of a sprint is to produce a valuable, useful increment, true or false. We'll be going with true here. The purpose of a sprint in Scrum is to produce a valuable, usable increment of the product. This increment should be in a done state, meaning that it has met the team's definition of done and that it is potentially shippable, adding value towards achieving the product's goal. Each sprint delivers an increment that builds on the previous one, thereby contributing to the overall progress of the product. This is a fundamental principle of Scrum, to create and deliver valuable increments of work at the end of every sprint. Question 11. Who creates the definition of done? A. The Scrum Master, as he or she is responsible for the development team productivity. B. The Scrum team, in a collaborative effort where the result is the common denominator of all members' definition. C. The product owner, as he or she is responsible for the product's success. And D. The development organization. Out of the options we've been given, the person that creates the definition of done is the Scrum team. This is collaboratively created by the Scrum team, which includes the product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. The definition of done outlines the criteria that must be met for a product backlog item to be considered as complete. This collaborative effort ensures that all the team members have a shared understanding of what constitutes as done, and this helps to maintain consistency and quality in the work delivered during the sprint. Question 12. What does it mean to say that an event has a time box? A. The event must happen at a set time. B. The event must happen by a given time. C. The event must take at least a minimum amount of time. D. The event can take no more than a maximum amount of time. A time box is the maximum duration for an event, beyond which the event should not continue. In Scrum, every event, like sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and the likes, every event has a time box in order to ensure that it remains focused and efficient. The purpose of this time box is to create a sense of urgency and to prevent unnecessary delays, ensuring that the team meets productivity and maintains momentum. For instance, sprint planning might be time boxed to 8 hours for a 1-month sprint, with shorter time boxes for shorter sprints, while daily Scrum is time boxed to 15 minutes, regardless of the team size. So the event is intended to produce outcomes within this time limit, and if more time is needed, it should be addressed in future planning, rather than extending the events beyond the set time box. So we'll be going with option D here. When an event is said to have a time box, it means that that event can take no more than a maximum amount of time. Question 13. A properly functioning Scrum team will have at least one release sprint and may well have several. True or false? For this, we'll be going with false. Scrum does not include a specific release sprint as part of its framework. Instead, it focuses on delivering a done increment at the end of each sprint, and this can be potentially released to production if the product owner decides it provides value. The Scrum team does not need a special sprint dedicated solely to releasing the products, because releases are typically planned based on the overall progress and readiness of this increment. But this can happen at any point after the sprint as long as the increment meets the definition of done. So our answer here is false. Question 14. What is the Scrum Master responsible for? A. Managing the performance of the Scrum team. B. The meetings and the objectives that a Scrum team sets for itself. C. The Scrum framework being adopted and being used properly. D. Keeping track of resource allocation. Looking at option A, the Scrum Master does not manage performance. The Scrum team is self-managing and performance accountability lies within the team itself. In option B, while the Scrum Master facilitates Scrum events, the product owner and Scrum team collaboratively decide the objectives and the goals. In option C, the Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring that the Scrum framework is understood, adopted, and followed properly by the team. So they serve as a servant leader who facilitates Scrum events, removes impediments, and helps the Scrum team to improve its practices. In option D, resource allocation is not the responsibility of the Scrum Master. This is more aligned with the traditional project management, but not agile frameworks like Scrum. So out of the options we've been presented with, the Scrum Master is responsible for the Scrum framework being adopted and used properly. The Scrum Master's primary role is to support the team, uphold Scrum principles, and ensure that the team operates effectively within the framework. Question 15. What is the main reason for the Scrum Master to be at the daily Scrum? A. To gather status and progress information to report to management. B. To write down any changes to the sprint backlog, including adding new items and tracking progress on the burn down. C. They do not have to be there. They only need to ensure the development team has a daily Scrum. D. To make sure every team member answers the 3 questions. In option A, Scrum is not about reporting to management. The daily Scrum is for the development team to inspect and adapt their plan and not to provide status updates. In option B, the development team owns the sprint background. The Scrum Master does not manage or track these changes. The Scrum Master's role is to ensure that the daily Scrum takes place and that it adheres to the Scrum framework. However, the daily Scrum is a meeting for the development team to plan their work for the day and discuss progress towards the sprint goal. The Scrum Master does not need to attend unless they are there to facilitate the process or remove obstacles. In option D, while the 3 questions were historically common in daily Scrum, Scrum does not mandate this structure. The Scrum Master only ensures that the purpose of the daily Scrum is met, but not by micromanaging participation. So out of this, the main reason for the Scrum Master to be at the daily Scrum, number 1, they do not have to actually be there. They only need to ensure that the development team has a daily Scrum. The Scrum Master acts as a facilitator and a coach, but not as an enforcer or manager, ensuring the development team can conduct the daily Scrum effectively. It is not in the Scrum Master's place to micromanage the team. They only go there as a facilitator and a coach. Question 16. How often should Scrum team membership change? A. As needed, while taking into account a short-term reduction in productivity. B. Never, because it reduces productivity. C. As needed, with no special allowance for changes in productivity. D. Every sprint to promote shared learning. Out of these options, we'll be going with option A. The Scrum team membership should change as needed, while taking into account a short-term reduction in productivity. Any changes can temporarily affect team productivity due to adjustments, onboarding, or relationship building. So the team may need some time to recover its rhythm and performance. Scrum promotes self-organizing teams and recognizes that changes are sometimes necessary. However, those changes should be managed thoughtfully in order to minimize disruptions. Question 17. Which statement best describes Scrum? A defined and predictive process that conforms to the principles of scientific management. B, a complete methodology that defines how to develop software. C, a cookbook that defines best practices for software development. D, a framework within which complex products in complex environments are developed. We'll begin with option D here. Scrum is not a methodology or a prescriptive set of steps. Instead, Scrum is a framework that has been designed to help teams develop complex products in complex and adaptive environments. It provides structure like roles, events, and artifacts, but it leaves room for teams to adapt and innovate based on their needs. Scrum allows teams to manage complexity through iterative and incremental progress while fostering collaboration, transparency, and adaptability. Question 18. How much of the sprint backlog must be defined during the sprint planning event? A. Just enough tasks for the Scrum Master to be confident in the development team's understanding of the sprint. B. The entire sprint backlog must be identified and estimated by the end of the sprint planning meeting. C. Enough so that the development team can create its best forecast of what it can do and to start the first several days of the sprint. D. Just enough to understand design and architectural implications. Out of these options we've been given, we'll begin with option C. The sprint backlog does not need to be fully detailed during the sprint planning event. The development team should define enough work to make a reliable forecast for the sprint goal and also have enough detail to begin working on tasks for the first few days. Additional details can then be added progressively as the team gains more clarity and progresses through the sprint. So they mustn't wait till they get the big picture. They can start off with the small tasks, and then as the task progresses, they can add more details to it. Question 19. What are two responsibilities of testers in a Scrum team? In this question, we'll be choosing two options. A. Verifying the work of programmers. B. Everyone in the development team is responsible for quality. C. Tracking quality metrics. D. Finding bugs. E. Scrum has no tester role. In Scrum, there are no predefined roles like tester or programmer within the development team. In Scrum, everyone collaborates and shares the responsibility for delivering a high-quality increment. Scrum emphasizes cross-functional teams where quality is a collective responsibility, so there is no single individual or role that is solely responsible for testing. So out of the options, we'll begin with options B and E. Everyone in the development team is responsible for quality, and Scrum has no tester roles. Scrum fosters a culture where the entire team takes ownership of quality through practices like continuous integration, automated testing, and frequent feedback loops. Question 20. Which technique is the best way the Scrum Master can ensure that the development team communicates effectively with the product owner? A. Monitor communication between them and facilitate direct collaboration. B. Teach the development team to talk in terms of business needs and objectives. C. Teach the product owner about the technologies employed during the sprints. D. Act as a go-between for them. The Scrum Master's primary role is to facilitate collaboration between the development team and the product owner, ensuring that communication flows smoothly and directly. The Scrum framework emphasizes transparency and direct communication without intermediaries, and this will help to avoid misunderstanding and ensure that there is alignment on goals and expectations. While option B is helpful, it doesn't directly address facilitating effective communication between the product owner and the development team. In option C, the product owner doesn't need to know technical details because their primary responsibility is managing the product's backlog and ensuring that the team delivers value. Option D goes against the principles of Scrum, which encourages direct communication. So the Scrum Master should enable collaboration but not act as a middleman. So out of these options, the technique that is the best way that will ensure that the development team communicates effectively with the product owner is to monitor communication between them and to facilitate direct collaboration. Effective collaboration between the product owner and the development team is very important for the success of a Scrum project, and the Scrum Master plays a supporting role in fostering that collaboration. This brings us to the end of the practice questions and answers for the Professional Scrum Master I. Don't forget to like, comment and share, and also hit the subscribe button so that you'll be informed when our next informative video will be dropping. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.